it's a very tricky thing, because there's no promise that people who take these loans out to become artists will ever be able to pay them back, and I think it's a very scary, option. And in the last 20 years or so,
I like the way that you're staring right into the camera.
I'm looking at our audience here.
Oh, okay.
Audience of 2. Over the last 100 plus, and over the last 20 years or so, artists come out with a pedigree of an MFA. They're even talking about having a PhD now.
Right.
And I don't know, I have a couple ideas about this. I think it's because there's so many artists who have debt that can't
They just want to
make
keep
it.
going back to school.
They either want to keep going back to school or have to make more programs so these people can teach and make money to pay back their loans. I don't know. It's a tricky situation.
I think that one of the things one of the issues that CAF really rallies around is advocating on behalf of the artist, and a lot of times we get pressure as a nonprofit institution to educate children. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because I think for both you and I, it was really our childhood experience, some great childhood experiences that have led us. I think both you and I can really consider this a vocation for us, for what we do, and almost not even a choice. And one that I think we're both so thankful that we did do. But we do get this idea, educate children about the arts. There's terrible funding cuts. But what should the kid that does get affected by one of these art programs and then has to grow up, and then there's nothing in place for them? There is no WPA for artists here. There are no artist residencies in Santa Barbara, for example, artist scholarships. So it's a little bit uneven, and I get sometimes uncomfortable as the executive director at CAF being a conduit for, and a voice for artists, and knowing that it's so important to teach the next generation about the value of the arts in our world, but also by trying to make space for artists who are practicing, not only by exhibitions, but by trying to advocate for them and trying to educate the audience, about the importance of having artists in our midst, and how y'all should just get tons of money.
Shouldn't we?
But talk to me. I love the story about how you went to art classes at the.
The Afro Am in LA.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to art classes. Oh man,
And your uncle is was an artist.
Cousin.
Yes,
cousin Sanford Biggers was a painter and muralist of considerable recognition in the U.S. and in South America, actually. But I grew up with art. Bottom line, I came from a very academic family. However, I rebelled against that as much as I could. But the one thing that really settled me and I was totally invested and engaged in was art from a very, very early age. And I started showing, solo exhibitions at high school and junior high school when I was 19. And some weekend Afro-American Museum, Position Park in LA. And it's been with me all my life. And I've done a lot of outreach stuff, vocational stuff. I consider it to lead by example at this point. I've done it so long that it's no separation of going out and talking to a group of youth or anything like that.
The thing is about this whole post-Black thing too is that one assumes that the entire nation has jumped to this post-Black situation, and I think that there's different times and places, because I still meet Latino kids, Mexican American, Chicano kids, who are using art as a way to learn about their identity in ways that people did in the 60s and 70s, and who may, transcend that.
That's how I learned.
But I think that's, so this idea of time and eras being like these specific things, it's back and forth. We're living in it's getting very complicated, but I think it's everybody's individual sort of trajectory. But it really is for people of color, whatever you want to say, the arts can be this voice for us.
Well, that's one of the reasons why some of my themes still touch on, you know, minority Americana. Because I'm not speaking just to academics or just to the art world. You know, I would like for kids to come and say, I see myself there. I get that.
Yeah.
That is totally important to me. Because otherwise I'm just sort of tap dancing, you know, for a group that feels self-satisfied by saying, we've let you show them with children. Where when I have breakdancers from the Bronx coming into the museum and dancing on my floor, but the minute they finish walking around and seeing the work by David Hammons or Picasso or anybody and saying, wow, that's dope. That works for me. You know? That's when I'm, you know, really satisfied with how relationships are formed and how knowledge is disseminated.
Yeah, I mean, I was an undergrad and I was writing a thesis on Chicano art from South Texas and Renaissance art from Florence. And both of those held sway and are part of my life and part of my identity. Parliamo italiano. Un po'. Okay, any other questions?
Like ODB says, to teach the truth to the young black youth.
So the question goes, as a professor in the arts at Columbia, what advice do you offer to students on how to succeed as an emerging artist in such difficult economic times?
You gotta love it, because, you know, it's often a thankless, you know, quest that you're on. And as my father told me, if you decide to do it, you have to do it with the same vigor and fervor as a physicist or anybody in any advanced vocation or direction. It's nothing to play with. You know, devote yourself to it and be in it for the good and the bad.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we've had discussions about how we have friends who chose different professions for different reasons, and the idea of comparing is really going to get you nowhere, because
it just hurts.
Ouch. It does, until they start buying your work.
Yeah, right.
They don't buy anything of mine, so I'm SOL, but shoot, out of luck. But I think that, you know, it's really about figuring out what you really want to do and then throwing your heart and soul into it, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
That's the only way it will work for you.
And maybe travel a little bit. Don't you think that really...
That was my goal.
Yeah.
Get some shows, travel, learn a language or two, get some stamps on the passport.
So I have another question. When you were discussing Codex, the new piece that you're working on, it may not be titled that, you were discussing the image of the slave with the lashes on the back that had become like raised welts, and kind of a history of the trauma he went through. And it kind of made me think of what's kind of an old practice, but something that we've seen coming back with a lot of football players. They're doing the branding, which is pretty deep scarification. Do you have any thoughts about that, or have you been thinking about that?
I grew up with a lot of branding because it's been very big in the Black Greek organizations, and I had uncles who were part of Omega Psi Phi, which are legendary for their Omega brands, sometimes a double Omega. My father is a Kappa, and the Kappa's brand diamonds. My best friend has a diamond with a K in the middle of it. So branding has always been sort of around me. There was a time when I actually considered getting scarification, just because I didn't think a tattoo was going to work on my complexion. And I considered getting scarification and sort of nodding back more towards an African root. But I decided against that. But I don't know. We had a long discussion about frats last night, and I actually, in a very twisted way, understand this camaraderie of what they do and these weird, very masochistic things they do to each other, especially with the Black Greeks, because it's so much about breaking people down and building them back up into a brotherhood. I get that. The polemics of frats is a whole other thing, and I can't really condone either because I do find problems with it, but somehow I understand what it's about. It's a very weird victimization and adoration process with the branding.